Welcome to Stranger Stitches, where I sit small fires in the darkest corners of crime and history. I'm rated at least PG for language and content. This is not for children. It is also not a news story. I'm just sitting on the porch telling tales like folks do. So come on over, sit that fine ass down, and buckle up, Buttercup. Today we take a look at the case of Joseph Robert Kondro, also known as the Longview Serial Killer. He is a convicted child kidnapper, assaulter, and you know what kind, and murderer who operated in Longview, Washington in the 1980s and 90s. Let me tell you, this piece of shit was born May 19th, 1959 in Marquette, Michigan to a Chippewa mother who already had 6 other children. He was given up for adoption at birth, and Lord knows his adoptive family, John and Eleanor Kondro, they have called him Joey, but I bet they wound up wishing they'd left him on somebody else's doorstep. He was raised in Iron River, Michigan, where the winters are colder than a witch's tit. This little turd attended Catholic parochial school. And can you imagine what he must have been like as a child? Yeah, them nuns to ride herd on him. Before his family packed up and moved to Castle Rock, Washington, and wouldn't you know it, evil followed him like a bad smell. His story gets darker than a new moon, so let's dig in. Kondro exhibited psychopathic tendencies from a very young age. Most kids at his age were worried about monsters under the bed and not so worried about becoming one themselves. He didn't seem to care. He admitted to molesting young girls as a child and developing murderous fantasies as he grew older. His criminal record read like a grocery list: auto and petty theft, drunk driving, domestic abuse, drug dealing, and forgery. He was collecting felonies like some folks collect stamps. John Douglas, an FBI profiler who's probably seen more evil than an exorcist, described Kondro as someone who showed psychopathic tendencies from an early age, including engaging in frequent fights with other children, killing their animals and neighborhood pets, wielding a knife, drinking alcohol. Kondro himself compared his lack of empathy and violent desires as an alligator lying in wait, coming up occasionally to feed. That's shiversome. And that's that bottom feeder's own words. Before I had actually murdered anyone, I did wonder how far I could take my sexual desires and increasing fantasies, including killing. And look what I've taken. That's what he said. And remember that whole community thing, because that's going to be important later. Now, what makes Kondro even more terrifying than the average serial killer, and trust me, is that this sumbitch targeted children within his own personal circle. Most serial killers hunt strangers, but this monster went after his friends' kids, the children of people who trusted him, who invited him into their homes, who thought of him as family. Now, it's dang near unheard of in the world of serial killing, and it makes him one of the most insidious predators you're probably going to hear about. 2 of his known victims are Rima Traxler and Kara Rude. There's a strong suspicion that he is involved in the case of Chila Silvernails as well. So listen here. He was friends with Rima's parents, and he and her stepfather were old classmates. On the very morning Lil Rima disappeared, this old fart was sitting there drinking beer with her stepfather like nothing was wrong. There's several things right off the bat. Why is Dad not involved in helping his kid get out the door? Okay, he's I'm sure. And why were they drinking so early in the day? Well, I guess you can't be drunk all day if you don't start early. And so, you can get a little insight into the kind of life our little Rima was living. And after the disappearance, which apparently had happened when the child was on her way home, Rima's mom went and used his phone to file the missing person report. Can you imagine the evil of that? Comforting a grieving mother while knowing damn well you're the monster that did this. With Kara's family, Kondro was a childhood friend of Kara's mother and had frequently lived in the garage of their home before getting kicked out for his alcoholism. To Kara and her sister, he wasn't just some stranger. He was their loving Uncle Joe. That little girl climbed into his Pontiac Firebird thinking that she was safe. Little did she know, Kondro had dated Chila Silvernails' mother before that child was murdered in 1982. That some bitch used intimate relationships, trust, and the sacred bonds of friendship as his hunting ground. He turned the very people who he should have protected, into unwitting victims of his crimes. Kondro confessed to the murders of the two girls, Rima Traxler and Kara Rude, and was strongly suspected in the murder of Chila Silvernails, among others. But that's the tip of the iceberg. Authorities strongly suspected he had been involved in the unexplained disappearances of other preteen girls throughout the region, and the police questioned Kondro about more than 70 other killings and disappearances, 70 other cases. Can you wrap your mind around that? He's still very suspect in some places, and this is what I meant about taking away the community's children. Yeah, I don't think he would have used that broad of a term if it had only been the three there's two that he confessed to, and the other one, we all know he did it. But yeah, he's his own where he took a community's children. In the early 1980s, authorities were baffled by the unexplained disappearances of several young girls in the southwestern Washington region. Police have said they don't believe an admitted child serial killer would go from 1985 to 1996 without an incident. But the attempts to connect Kondro with the other missing children have come to nothing. And this sick bastard knew exactly what he was doing. He hinted there have been other victims, but saw nothing to gain by confessing. Like we said, he's been a suspect in 70 of them. But he was very coy when he was asked about the other potential victims. Over the years, detectives have tried to persuade him that he could do right by the families, to show a little remorse and help recover the bodies and end the mysteries for the families. His words, "I won't go there." And he smirked. You know, that little half-assed smile? Yeah, that's what he, and it was the only sign of any sort of emotion during a nearly 3-hour interview. Other than that, stone cold and straight-faced. Well, his case had garnered some pretty significant media attention due to the very heinous nature, his manipulation of the victims and law enforcement, and the insights they offered into the development of psychopathy and criminal profiling. But what they had to offer was a glimpse into the mind of a freaking animal who walked among decent folks for way too long. Probably took more of their kids than we'll ever know. Mercy, damn the arrogance of that piece of trash, talking about stealing children like they're damn trophies. Now, he's meaner than a rattlesnake, and we know that. Kondro's victims were typically young girls known to him or his family, who he exploited through trust. This snake in the grass of what was called a human being, I suppose, used the most sacred thing we have in small communities, and that's trust between neighbors, and turned it into a weapon against them. So, little Rima Traxler was 8 years old. Little girl disappeared on May 15th, 1985. Well, Asshat's birthday is May 19th, so he's probably just giving himself a little celebration. She was from Longview, Washington, and on her way home from school. Yeah, and he was just drinking with this morning. A little girl with her whole life ahead of her, probably thinking about what Mama was making for dinner. Kondro, like I said, was friends of the family. He had learned their safety password, which was unicorn, and y'all, please stop using that. Every kid in the neighborhood, especially little girls, use unicorn as their password. Now, let me tell you something I know. A guy gave his daughter the password of motherfucker. Yeah. Because what child in the world ever say that? Right? They'd get in trouble with their parents. They'd get chewed out. But only the person who really knew that that was the password. I mean, you don't have to go rough, but maybe more than a word, maybe a phrase, maybe something easy to remember, like tie your shoes, something like that. But don't pick a one-word thing and don't pick something that little girls would really like because the bad guys know this. So he knew her password and got her into his vehicle. Yeah. Then he abused her, bludgeoned her, strangled her out at a place called Germany Creek, a place that should have been nothing but a peaceful Washington wilderness. Her remains were never discovered despite his confession, which means that child's family will never closure of laying her to rest. But here's makes it, oh my gosh, I gotta sit within it, y'all. He acknowledges that 11 years later, he found 12-year-old Kara Rude, 11 years old. Yeah. Yeah, and 11 years later, after the incident, it's like he was hunting, planning, and Lord knows what else. I don't think that these really take a break. It's just something that they haven't been caught for, or they have found something that will suffice in the meantime. But I sure don't think he broke off for 11 years. And just like I always tell you, it's never the mannequin. Well, I don't believe he took a break for a skinny minute. That's probably the time that it took for him to be involved with those other 70 some cases. Now, he might not have done all of them, but I bet that's when a lot of them took place. Now, BTK took a break, and him I believe. He was busy with family and kids, but Kondro was not involved in his kid's life at all. But I leave it up to you to noodle that one out. Let's talk about Kara. She's 12 years old. Baby Jesus, it breaks my heart. Little Kara vanished on November 21st, 1996 from Longview after entering Kondro's car near her middle school. She was just 12 years old, probably worried about homework and thinking about boys and the normal things a sixth grader would be thinking about. Kondro was a childhood friend of Kara's mother. Imagine that mama, knowing that you trusted your friend with your kid. He was seen with suspicious lacerations after her disappearance. She probably gave it all she had to fight back. The detectives are worth their badges, and they were all over that. But still, you gotta link it to the evidence. Her body was later found in an abandoned Volkswagen near Mount Solo. She had been abused, strangled, and thrown away. But, praise the Lord and pass the biscuits, DNA evidence from that crime scene matched this piece of shit, finally giving law enforcement the smoking gun they needed. And you know what finally caught this POS? The science. The detectives found the crime scene and sealed the deal with DNA. And because of the weather and the temperature, I guess the as well on Mount Solo, that Volkswagen acted exactly like a cold storage refrigerator. Yeah, they were able to find strong evidence because the temperature and the climate, and that old Volkswagen had acted like a refrigerator. Chila Silvernails, 8 years old. This baby girl disappeared on April 21st, 1982, from Kalama, Washington, on her way to a school bus stop. Think about that, just 8 years old, going to catch the school bus like millions of kids do every day. Her nude body was found the next day, stabbed and strangled in a creek. Kondro had dated Chila's mother, so once again, he knew the child and she knew him. This sick fuck used personal connections to get close to his victims, while he was a notorious local murderer suspected in her killing. No strong evidence linked him to the case. And that probably kept him up all night with a stupid grin on his face. As of April 22nd, 2022, the case remains open, and I believe what's happening is the investigators are just waiting on technology to catch up. I think that little girl deserves justice, and I know that eventually she will get it. Kondro chose, and I quote, "Try to do this with a stranger or something like that. You know, they always fight back." I wanted everything to run perfectly, and okay, how does he know that strangers fight back? Yeah, because with the family and the parents of the two that he confessed to, how does he know that strangers fight back? He talks about murdering children like he was planning a night out. He tells that story casually, between revealing unspeakable horror the way people talk about the weather. He viewed children as easy targets because they're very trusting. His words. Ain't that the most heartbreaking truth you've heard today? Children trust because that's how God made them. And he turned that innocence into his hunting ground. When asked if he believed he would continue killing if he hadn't been caught, here's what he said. Yeah, I feel real comfortable about killing. I mean, killing for me is second nature by now. Comfortable is what he said, comfortable, like he was talking about his favorite chair or something. Do you believe I do that he probably had well over that he confessed to, because to get comfortable with something, I think it would have taken a little longer than that. But that's just an idea out of my own head. When John Douglas, that's the FBI profiler, pressed him about whether he felt any remorse for his crimes, you know what he said? No, I have no regrets. Just flat out no. Like Douglas had asked him if he regretted what he had for breakfast. The only regret is that he should have been a better father to his own children. When Douglas pushed him a little further, asking what he'd do differently, Kondro said he would have took her out to a different spot so she wouldn't have been found. His words, meaning his only regret was getting caught and not the murders themselves, but this sick fuck knew exactly what he was doing. He hinted that there have been other victims, but saw nothing to be gained by confessing. Kondro is still a suspect in all those other 70-some slayings and disappearances. He is equally evasive. When asked about the potential victims, over the years, detectives have tried to persuade him that he could do right by the families to help recover the bodies and end the agonizing mystery. He says, I won't go there, with that stupid grin on his face. That was the only show of emotion in that nearly 3-hour interview. In 22 hours of interviews with Longview Police Detective Scott McDaniel, Kondro again compared himself to an alligator resting at the bottom of a pond. Sometimes he came up to feed. There's an adrenaline rush, and it's kind of addicting, he says. The arrogance of him even extended to his own punishment. He had the audacity to say, if someone did what I did, I'd want them on death row, admitting that he knew damn well he deserves to die for what he's done. If you hook up a meter to my emotions, they're totally flatlined, he says. Oh, and that was from a 1999 prison interview with a Daily News reporter. I don't know where my are, and I could give a damn about what anybody thinks, he told them. He was also aware on some level that his actions were immoral, but that was just on the surface. He doesn't really care. He just knows how it ought to be. Even apparently able to empathize. I wrote this, and it's not my bad penmanship. It's just getting hard to read because he's doing the same old song and dance over and over. It's like he wrote a script and he's sticking to it. He repeats the same thing over and over. Oh my God. So he, in a kind of half-assed way, he acknowledged that what he'd done was wrong while simultaneously bragging about how good he was at getting away with it. Mercy damn. Finally, after years of this SOB walking free and breathing the same air as normal people, Kondro was arrested for Kara Root's murder after DNA evidence linked him to the scene of the crime. Science caught that bastard. The investigators found the site. Science sealed the deal. Picture this. Joe Kondro is sitting there in shackles, cold as yesterday's grits, resting his chin on his big old hands while he tells investigators exactly how he used those same hands to abuse and murder little girls and get away with it for a dozen years that we know of, and the rest. And bragging about how he got away with it so long that he could do it again and again. That's because no one ever looks that close to home. And what he said, that if he had a second chance, he wouldn't be sitting there in that cramped little room being watched by armed guards like a dangerous animal he is. No, sir. He had the balls to say that if he could change just one thing, he'd be more careful in hiding the bodies. Then he'd be free as a bird right now to be out there hunting again. So, Joe Kondro, adopted son, father of 6 children of his own, serial killer of how many others? May he rot in hell. To avoid the death penalty because he was way too much of a coward to face what he really deserved, he struck a plea deal with the prosecutors, confessing to Root's murder and the unsolved killing of Rima Traxler. He was sentenced to 55 years in prison at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla, where hopefully every day felt like a lifetime in hell. I hope he's treated as I hear that pedophiles are. Kondro died in prison on May 3rd, 2012, at the age of 52 from advanced liver disease, probably because he liked beer for breakfast, 16 days before his 53rd birthday. And you know what? I hope it was excruciating. I hope he felt every second of his organs shutting down, knowing he'd never take another breath of free air or hurt another innocent child. I hope he spent his final days in agony. I hope his last thoughts and his innermost being was that he was truly sorry for what he was done, even if he couldn't say it. I hope that weighed on his heart so heavy as he died. You know what? I'm not going to be ugly anymore. I'm just going to move on. Despite some of the cases with similar patterns remain open, the Cowlitz County Sheriff's Office continues to investigate Chila Silvernails' murder utilizing some new technology. I thought that's what they was waiting for. And they are not giving up on this case. They believe, as we do, that she deserves justice. Kondro's cases contributed to a broader understanding of serial offending and not forgetting to look too close to home, particularly the psychological factors that drive such individuals and the techniques used to analyze and apprehend them. Profile a killer that preyed on his friends' children. I don't want that job. Interviews aim to create better profiles and help identify and capture the serial killers who are among us. And I believe that there are probably more than we know. Well, y'all, I can leave it there. That's me for this week. Hug your kids. Sweet dreams. See you next time.